Hello everyone, it's Nora Villarreal, and I just wanted to talk a little bit today about integrating your sources into your paragraphs, because I know you've done a lot of reading this week. You've read about formal voice, you've read about how to integrate quotations into your own sentences. You've read about using signal phrases to do so. You've read about citing sources in your text. You've read about all kinds of things this week, and I know it can seem a little bit overwhelming. So the point of this video is just to show you really how simple what I'm asking you to do in Essay 2 is. So if you recall, for Essay 2, you're either going to write a comparison and contrast or a cause and effect essay. It's up to you which one of those modes you'd like to write in. And for this example, I'm going to imagine that I'm writing a cause and effect essay, okay? And the topic for this pretend paper I'm writing is about deforestation. So let's say I've started my draft, I have it all set up in proper MLA format, I've worked a little bit on my opening paragraph as far as my attention getter and a tentative thesis statement, and now I'm ready to start writing the body of my paper. So I'm on my first paragraph here. Now, in your readings for this week, you read about that claim evidence analysis format. So please notice that I'm starting this paragraph with an original claim. I'm not using anything from a source yet. This is just my own idea, which is that destructive agricultural practices cause deforestation worldwide. Okay, so I'm starting with that claim. Next, I'm going to need to bring in some of that evidence. So I developed this idea a little bit more by saying that most people don't really intend to cause destruction to the land, but that poor farming practices and uncontrolled migration can sort of lead to the destruction of this natural habitat. Now I'm ready to bring in a piece of evidence from one of my sources. And again, really my hope with this video is just to show you how simple this really is. So here is a source that I have found on deforestation, and you can see that it comes from the Foreign Affairs website, and the title of this article is A Light in the Forest. It's subtitled here, Brazil's Fight to Save the Amazon and Climate Change Diplomacy. And notice that I do have an author here by Jeff Tollefson. And if I think about the rules for citing sources in a text, that first thing I always want to look for is if my web page has an author. Now this one happens to, okay, so I'm going to use my author's name within the body of my paper. Some of you are going to be using web pages that don't have authors, and that's perfectly acceptable. Okay, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Just remember, in that case, just as it said in your reading from the style book here, when you don't have an author that you're using, you're going to go ahead and use the title of the article instead of the author's name. So they give an example right here of using the title of the article in quotation marks. Now again, remember, 99.999% of web pages do not have page numbers, okay? You know, if you print it out, you might see something at the bottom of your page that has a page number on it. That's not the page number of the web page, that just has to do with the print job. So in these examples here for in-text citations, you're seeing page numbers, but keep in mind, for your essay too, most likely your web page does not have a page number, so you just don't need to use it. It's really simple. So okay, let me remind you what I was talking about. So we were talking about how destructive farming practices can cause the loss of trees worldwide, and now I'm looking for a piece of evidence from my source. So again, I'm going to note that his name is Jeff Tollefson, and of course I've already read my source, so I'm going to scroll down until I find the piece of evidence that I'm looking for here. Okay, so here we find out that their government did not properly plan for the effect of a population explosion in the basement, and the result was a land rush. So here's the part that I'm going to use in my essay. So what I've done is I've highlighted and copied it. I'm going to jump back to my paper, and I'm going to introduce this information. Remember, we always need our quotations integrated into one of our own sentences, and a really easy way to do that is to use the author's name with a signal phrase, or again, if you don't have that author's name, you can use the web page title and a signal phrase as well. So you might write something like this. For example, Jeff Tollefson, in his article, A Light in the Forest, discusses how Brazil experienced an unplanned migration. He states, now I'm going to paste my evidence in. Now, of course, notice since I pasted it without merging my formatting, I'm going to have to take this and make sure that I change it back to Times New Roman 12-point font, which I can do right here. And notice here's my signal phrase that says states. So this is letting my reader know sort of who's telling me this, right? Now, here's my quotation. It says, he states the result was a land rush during which short-term profiteering from slash and burn agriculture prevented anything resembling sustainable development. Okay, so this is a piece of evidence that's supporting my main idea. I've used my signal phrase here to introduce this piece of evidence. So you'll notice that I use that method 1 that you read about on Professor Rambo's webpage. Right here I have an incomplete sentence with a comma that's introducing my word-for-word quote that I've enclosed in quotation marks here. But one thing I want to point out is that even though I mentioned my author's name over here, I didn't do so in the sentence that the evidence that he wrote actually appears in. Notice that. So I mentioned him here, and of course the first time we mention the author we always want to use his or her full name. But in the sentence that I actually use the evidence in, I didn't use this author's name, so I need to make sure I cite him. So there's two ways I can go about that. I can either use his last name right here. Okay, that would work. And in that case, I don't need to add any other citation because we know who our author is. And again, because we don't have a page number, we don't need to include it. This to me sounds a little bit repetitive though, because we've already mentioned his name right here. So I'm going to change this back to that pronoun he. And then instead of ending my sentence right here, I'm going to go ahead and cite him in my parenthetical citation and then include my period afterwards. Okay? So notice everything that we need to think about for this integration of evidence. We've cited our source, right? And remember, we can either do that with our signal phrase here or in our parentheses at the end. Either place is perfectly correct. We don't need it both. One or the other will work. And again, because we don't have page numbers, I haven't included those anywhere. It's very simple, okay? One other thing I'd like to point out is the importance of punctuation here. So notice since I use my incomplete sentence with the comma, I have my comma here that's introducing the rest of the quotation. Because this is a word-for-word quotation, I have used my quotation marks to mark it as such. Here I have my parenthetical citation with my author's last name. And notice, even though it seems kind of strange, that period does not appear until after the citation. And the way I always remember that is that the citation is still part of this complete sentence, right? So we don't want to end this sentence until after we've included that citation. So now that I have my cited piece of evidence and I've introduced it properly, I'm ready to go on and analyze it. So here I would type another few sentences explaining how this evidence supports my main idea. And then here I'm ready to bring in my next piece of evidence. So then I'll go through and do the same thing that I've just done. I'll repeat this pattern. So I'll have evidence 2, and then I'll analyze that secondary piece of evidence. And each paragraph should have about 2 to 4 pieces of evidence, so I might repeat that again, I might not. It just depends sort of how much I have to say about it. So just as a quick kind of review of what I hope you take away from this video, I know that reading through all those web pages might get just a little bit overwhelming or a little bit confusing. So I just wanted to show you really how simple it is. All you'll need to do is find a good web page, find a good piece of evidence that supports your ideas, look around that web page, see if you can locate an author. And again, if I were to not have an author for this web page, I would go ahead and use this title in quotation marks for my citation, right? So in that case, it would just look something like this. Okay, very simple. So here we might say something like, the Foreign Affairs website, the Foreign Affairs site states, and then my piece of evidence. And again, I'm imagining here that I don't have an author. So in this case, I would go ahead and use the title of the article, okay? So as long as we have our properly integrated and cited piece of evidence, as long as we know what the author or title is, we don't need to worry about page numbers. So I hope that maybe helps clarify a couple things for you, and if you have any questions, of course, please do let me know. Thanks.